The train screeched to a halt at Willow Creek station, sending a wave of dust curling through the morning air. The sun had just begun to climb over the ridge, turning the empty platform gold. She stood there, small, fragile, and shaking in her torn wedding gown. The veil hung limp against her back, her hands clutching a brown suitcase as though it was all she had left in the world. Nobody looked twice. In a town used to strange sights, drifters, gamblers, bounty men, one more broken soul didn't stir much interest. But there was something about her, something that made the silence around her louder. The conductor tipped his hat and muttered, "You stayin' here, miss?" She only nodded, her lips trembling. I guess I don't have anywhere else to go." Her name was Clara Whitmore, once the pride of the Whitmore family of Denver, a name that used to mean something before the scandals and broken promises. She had boarded the train in lace and hope, believing she was on her way to marry a man who'd sworn he'd love her till his last breath. But that man never came. Instead, a telegram arrived halfway through her journey: "Wedding cancelled. Don't come." By the time she reached Willow Creek, she didn't even know why she got off the train. Maybe because it was the last stop before the desert. Maybe because her heart couldn't take one more mile of pretending she was still a bride. The wind tugged at her veil. Somewhere, a dog barked. The few men on the platform whispered to each other, their eyes cutting toward her with curiosity, pity, and something darker. Clara straightened her back and told herself not to cry. But tears came anyway, streaking through the dust on her face. She whispered to herself, "You're strong. You're fine. You just need to breathe." That's when a small voice said, "Mama." Clara froze. A boy no older than 5 stood near the hitching posts, a wooden horse clutched in his hand, straw hat crooked on his head. His blue eyes, wide, innocent, disbelieving, locked on her face. Behind him, a tall man came striding out of the stables, wiping his hands on a rag. Broad shoulders, sunburnt skin, jaw shadowed with stubble. "Eli," he called. "What are you?" He stopped when he saw her. For a long moment, the world stilled. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The man's name was James Hollister, rancher's son, rough around the edges but with the kind of quiet strength that came from years of mending fences, not words. He stared at the crying woman in the wedding dress, then at his son, his only child, born from heartbreak and raised on stories of an angel mother who'd died too soon. But Eli was pointing, eyes bright with certainty. "Papa, that's her. That's my mama." A hush fell over the platform. The few bystanders turned to look, some chuckling, others whispering. Clara blinked, startled, shaking her head. "No, sweetheart, I'm not." But the boy ran forward, arms outstretched, before she could finish. He buried his face against her torn gown and whispered, "I knew you'd come back." Something inside Clara broke. She knelt, holding him instinctively, tears slipping free again. "Oh, child, I think you're mistaken." James approached slowly, confusion written across his weathered face. "Mom, I'm sorry if my boy startled you. He's been missin' his mother somethin' fierce. Passed on when he was just a baby." Clara tried to stand, but her knees trembled. "No harm done, sir. He's just got a kind heart." James nodded, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "You sure you're all right? You look like you've been through hell and back." Her laugh came out more like a sob. "That's one way to put it." He shifted his weight, unsure what to say. There was something haunting about her face, like she'd known too much sorrow for someone so young. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Look, the town ain't much, but my family's ranch is just down the road. My ma's always got a pot of stew on. You're welcome to sit a spell, wash the dust off. No expectations." Clara hesitated. Every instinct screamed she should keep moving. But she had nowhere to go, no money, no family left to send for. And the way the little boy clung to her hand, it was like he was holding on to something more than a stranger. "Just for a while," she whispered. James gave a slow nod. "Then come on. Hollister Ranch ain't fancy, but it's honest. They walked together down the dirt road, Eli skipping between them, humming softly. Behind them, the station faded into a blur of sunlight and dust, like the end of one life and the start of another. As they reached the split rail fence marking the ranch boundary, Clara looked around. Horses grazed lazily in the pasture, the hills rolled like golden waves, and the air smelled of sage and rain-soaked earth. For the first time in months, she felt something stir in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but maybe the memory of it. Inside the ranch house, Martha Hollister, James's mother, looked up from her sewing with surprise. "Good Lord, James, who's this?" James rubbed the back of his neck. "Found her at the station. She's had a rough day. Thought we could give her a meal." Martha's eyes softened when she saw the torn lace, the smudged cheeks. "Of course. Come in, dear." Eli tugged Clara's hand, leading her to the kitchen table. "Sit here, Mama," he said brightly. Clara smiled weakly. "You can just call me Clara, sweetheart." But the boy shook his head. "Mama suits you better." Martha's gaze flicked to her sons. James only shrugged, whispering, "He'll grow out of it." But none of them knew how wrong he was. Because from that day on, the quiet woman in the wedding gown would change all their lives forever. Clara hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell of beef stew filled the kitchen. It wasn't fancy food like she'd known in Denver. No delicate sauces or imported wines. But something about that rich, smoky scent made her chest tighten. It was the smell of home. Martha Hollister ladled stew into a bowl and set it before her. "Eat, dear. You look like the wind could blow you clean away." Clara murmured a thank you and took a cautious sip. The warmth spread through her body, melting the cold fear that had been her constant companion. James leaned against the doorway, watching. He didn't say much, never was a man of words, but something in his eyes made Clara nervous. Not because he looked at her the way other men did, but because he didn't. He looked like he was trying to understand her, to piece together the story behind her trembling hands and torn lace. Eli sat beside her, swinging his legs under the table. "Mama, can I show you my horse after you eat?" Clara's heart twisted. "Maybe after I rest a bit," she said softly. The boy grinned, satisfied. When dinner was done, Martha wiped her hands on her apron. "You can stay here tonight, child. We've got a spare room. James's sister used it before she married." Clara opened her mouth to refuse, but Martha's tone left no room for argument. "You're not sleeping at the station, not when I've got a warm bed sitting empty." Tears stung Clara's eyes. "Thank you. You don't even know me." Martha gave her a long, kind look. "Don't need to. Sometimes a woman can tell when another's run out of places to go." That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the wind outside. The ranch creaked like a living thing. Doors settling, horses snorting softly in the barn, the far-off hoot of an owl. And beneath it all, her heart whispered questions she wasn't ready to answer. What would she do now? Who would she be, now that her old life had crumbled like dust? She had fled Denver to escape shame, the whispers that she was jilted, unworthy, cursed. But running had left her with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of ghosts. Outside her window, the ranch lights flickered out one by one until only the moon lit the yard. She thought of James, how he'd stood tall and silent, his voice low and gentle when he spoke. He wasn't the kind of man who would promise the world, but something about him told her he'd never break what he did promise. Maybe that was rarer than love itself. By morning, she'd decided she'd leave after breakfast. It wouldn't be right to burden them longer. She was a stranger, after all. But when she stepped into the kitchen, Eli was already waiting, boots on, hat crooked, his little wooden horse in hand. "Mama, you promised." James looked up from his coffee. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was gentle. "He's been up since dawn waiting on you." Clara's protest died on her lips. How could she deny a child who looked at her like she'd hung the stars? They walked out to the corral, the morning sun turning the grass to silver. Eli proudly showed her his pony, Buttercup, a scruffy mare with one ear bent and a coat full of burrs. Clara smiled and patted the horse's muzzle. "She's beautiful," she said, meaning it. Eli beamed. "She likes you. Papa says animals can tell when someone's got a kind heart." James chuckled. "You been listenin' to my tall tales again, son?" Eli shrugged. "Maybe." Clara laughed, a sound she hadn't made in months. It startled even her, and James noticed. There was light in that laugh, soft and broken, like sunlight through a cracked window. As days turned into weeks, Clara stayed, first out of politeness, then out of need, and finally, because she couldn't bring herself to leave. She helped Martha with the housework, mended Eli's torn shirts, and found peace in the simple rhythm of ranch life. At night, she'd sit on the porch, listening to crickets, while James repaired tack or sharpened tools. Sometimes he'd tell her stories, about the drought years, about how Eli's mother had died of fever. He spoke without bitterness, only quiet grief. "You must miss her terribly," Clara said once, her voice trembling. He nodded. "Every day. But a man learns to keep goin'. You'd know something about that, I reckon." Clara didn't answer. Some wounds didn't have words. Still, something gentle began to grow between them, unspoken, fragile, like the first green shoots after a storm. But peace in Willow Creek never lasted long. It started one dusty afternoon when a stagecoach rolled into town carrying a man in a gray suit with a Denver accent and 2 polished boots. He walked into the general store asking questions about a woman in a wedding gown seen getting off the train weeks earlier. Said she was his fiancée. The storekeeper, old Mr. Raines, told him what he knew, which wasn't much, but enough. By sundown, that man was riding toward Hollister Ranch with determination in his eyes and anger in his jaw. Meanwhile, Clara was in the barn brushing Buttercup when she heard hoofbeats. Fast, sharp, deliberate. She turned, and her heart froze. "Clara Whitmore," he said, voice dripping with scorn. "So this is where you've been hiding." Her breath caught. Thomas Keating dismounted, his fine coat gathering dust. "You've made quite the spectacle, my dear. Running off, leaving your family humiliated." "I didn't run," she whispered. "You sent that telegram. You ended it." His eyes hardened. "Because you made me look a fool. You think I'd marry a woman whose father's fortune went up in smoke?" "No, but you've always been dramatic. What are you now? Some ranch hand's charity case?" Clara stepped back, shaking. "You should leave," he smirked, "and let you soil my name even further." "No, Clara, you're coming back with me. One way or another." Before he could touch her, James appeared at the barn door, his shadow filling the space. "You best take your hands off her, mister." Thomas turned, eyes narrowing. "And you are James Hollister. She's under my roof, and that means under my protection." The air between them crackled. Clara's heart pounded. "Please, both of you, don't." But it was too late. Words had become weapons, pried their trigger, and as the sun dipped behind the hills, one thing became clear. The past Clara tried to outrun had finally caught up.